Alrighty, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Can, I'm with Linkso, and we've got Lisa and Kathleen here today. And they're both master gardeners, and they're going to talk a little bit about that, but I'll leave that to them. Please do type in your questions via chat, and we'll address them towards the end of the talk. And then we'll get to most of the questions, if not all of them, by end of the talk. But welcome, Kathleen. Welcome, Lisa. Floor is all yours.
Okay, right. I am frozen, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a sec.
Okay.
And I'll be right back.
Okay. While Kathleen's resharing her presentation, I'll just do a short introduction. So Kathleen and I first learned gardening, well, I don't know, whatever. Our parents were farmers, but education wise at City College in San Francisco, that was a long time ago with Pam Pierce. And since then, I think actually Terry Linkso has been our mentor and has taught us a lot of what we know about soil. And I think we're both very, very passionate about soil, which led us to studying a lot about cover crops. So, and Kathleen's an ISA Certified Arborist and Horticulturist, and I'm horticulturist and run a small farm.
And we're both master gardeners.
And we're both master gardeners, and I'm a master composter and work with a bunch of lovely master gardeners.
Okay. So here we go.
Okay.
Hey, down here, it's me, the ground. Now look, I don't like to make a fuss. I've grown accustomed to people walking all over me. Jeez. But generations of chemicals and tilling have left me spent and lifeless, dried out, flaky, like dust in the wind. But the good news is we can change this and literally bring me back to life. How? Planting cover crops between harvests protects the ground and helps make the soil healthy again. And I can fight climate change. Check this out. I can suck in carbon from the atmosphere and put a little something back in it. Join me. When you plant cover crops, you make soil happy.
Wow, good job, Kathleen.
Thank you. Oops. Okay. So what we're going to cover in this class is what is a cover crop, why cover crop, how to cover crop, and then some of my favorite plants and some charts. And excuse me, Ken has the PDF of this, so you can get a copy of it if you want. So this was the Dust Bowl. A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself, and this was overtilled. So what is a cover crop? Lisa, you want to do the soil food web?
Sure. I mean, I think the more you study gardening, the more you know that everything is just in systems. And so the system that drives life on planet Earth really is photosynthesis, is taking the energy from the sun, turning it, taking the chemical energy, turning it into, the plants are taking in the energy, turning it into carbohydrates, pushing those carbohydrates, storing them in the roots, and the roots are sloughing off, let's say 40% of their carbohydrates to feed the life in the soil. So it goes into trophic levels. So that first trophic level is the microorganisms in the soil. And then it goes on to the second trophic level, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, and so forth. So our whole system is based on having living roots in the soil. And that is key. And that's what a cover crop is having living roots in the soil at all times. And that's why I think Kathleen and I are so passionate about cover cropping. In the olden days, people used to leave fields fallow without cover cropping, thinking they were giving the soil a rest. But that's the worst thing you can do. You always want to have living roots in your soil. And just by way of cover crop, you've probably also heard it called green manure or living mulch. And those are all the same names for keeping your soil covered with living plants and living roots. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a miracle that plants can take energy from the sun and make carbon. It's none of us would be here without it.
Yep.
It's fascinating. So what is a cover crop? This is a quote by Lisa. A cover crop is a crop that is planted for your soil, not you.
In other words, you're planting that cover crop to feed the soil. And that could be a radish, it could be lettuces, it could be a lot of things that you might want to eat. But if you're growing it as a cover crop, don't eat them, because you just chop and drop them. You're feeding the soil, not your body.
Yeah. So there's scientists in the world that are trying to build machines to pull carbon dioxide out of the air because of climate change. And one NASA scientist said we'll spend as much as $7 trillion a year to remove that carbon dioxide. The alternative to that is plant more plants, because that's what plants do naturally. They
Yeah.
put carbon dioxide out of the air and they put it into the soil.
Yeah. I'm going to add just one thing to this slide, Kathleen.
Yeah.
I was listening to NPR yesterday, and I don't know if people have been following this at all, but they're now looking into excavating these gigantic caves underneath our, I'm not making this up, even though it sounds like I am, of excavating huge caves underneath our national forest and in our national parks, and taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and pumping them into these caves to store carbon dioxide. And I mean, I can't help but think, just go talk to a gardener. I mean, go talk to an arborist. If you're trying to sequester carbon, go plant a tree, but don't start digging up these gigantic holes in the earth and pumping, which means pipelines and trucks, and trying to get the carbon to these big caves. And they're like serious. They're like, there's a lot of research dollars going into this.
Well, when you see my last slide is one of the scariest new things they're thinking of doing. So I'll hold off till then. But it's like, go talk to Gabe Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, there's experts out there that it's crazy.
It is crazy. Okay.
So anyway, cover crop.
Cover crop.
Plants can do it. They've been doing it forever. So this actually segues perfectly into this next slide, which is the main reason why I cover crop, is to sequester carbon. They have done studies, and if we can increase our carbon content worldwide by 2%, we will have drawn down all the carbon dioxide that's causing climate change. So, I mean, it's like a no-brainer. Just put more carbon in your soil by using your plants. So sequester carbon from the atmosphere into the soil. These are the reasons why you want to cover crop, where it belongs, by leaving roots in the ground. And that's an important key to this, is you need to leave the roots in the ground. And if you see this down here, reduce tillage, you don't want to be digging, double digging. I don't care if you are John Jeevers, don't double dig. If you do it once and then never do it again. You don't want to dig your soil, because you're breaking up all of those microbes and the fungi and all the wonderful things that are holding the carbon in the soil. So don't dig.
And that, just to call digging another name, don't rototill. You know, you see
Yeah.
people out there thinking, oh, I'm gonna make my soil so good. And they rototill, and that just breaks up all your aggregates. It lacerates your soil.
Yeah. It builds the soil's organic matter and humus content and improves the soil structure. So all these little bacteria and all these little guys are getting food, exudates from the plant, and they're holding carbon in their little bodies, and then they die, and the process continues. To increase the nutrient availability, cover crops go down deeper and they bring up nutrients and they deposit them in your topsoil, and then they're available for your crop when you plant your next crop. I just found this slide recently and I really liked it. So there's corn grown all by itself, and here's corn grown with some grasses. And look at the root structures and the carbon down there. I mean, it's amazing the things that roots do.
Yeah, and I'll just add, because I don't think we made it clear earlier. So, you know, you don't need to use fertilizer at all, certainly not inorganic fertilizer, but you don't even really need to use organic fertilizer. If you're cover cropping, what you're doing, so along that root system, why you want to see it on the right-hand side and not on the left-hand side is all the exudate, so all that carbon dioxide that the plants are, it's called an exudate, but that they're secreting off into those roots are then feeding all the microbes, and the microbes in turn are what's feeding your plant. So, and this has now been scientifically proven. So, I mean, the plant will say, hey, today I need calcium, and the fungi will go and find calcium in the soil for that plant and bring it to the plant. So it's a symbiotic relationship that the roots are giving off carbohydrates to feed the microbes, and the microbes are giving the plant what it needs when it needs it. So that's why you want these very robust root systems. That's what you're after, is the more roots in the ground, the better, because that means you're going to have more microbes, and your microbes are going to feed your plant and keep your plant healthy. And then a healthy plant is a plant that can fend for itself. It doesn't need anything. You don't need to spray it, or that plant will do what that plant is supposed to do. And it'll fend for itself. Just like when we're healthy, we can eschew, you know, pathogens and viruses and bacterial infections, etc.
Okay, next. So this is just about feeding the soil and the amazing things that the microbes do. They create aggregates. They're vital to plant health. A good cover crop will outcompete your weeds, but as Lisa made me put, weeds do provide your soil life with exudates. So something growing is better than bare soil, which is true. I agree with that.
Yeah. So the main thing, you just never want bare soil.
Yeah. It increases your water infiltration from rainfall and irrigation for your plants and to recharge the water table. It creates aggregates which absorb water, whereas dust, I mean, you've seen dusty soil or bare soil, water just runs right off of it, which there's a slide about that. And it cleans the water as it runs through the soil. If you have a lot of carbon in your soil, it cleans it just like a Brita water filter. And all this is from the USDA and from UC Davis, but all the red, and there's even red around us, is very poor quality water. And it's because that water, well, number one, it's been fertilized with non-organic fertilizer, but it also, they haven't cover cropped. So it's not running through healthy soil and getting clean.
I'm just going to emphasize that, sorry, Kathleen, that when Kathleen is saying it, what she's talking about is the roots are pumping carbon. So it's like you have this layer of sequestered carbon that then every drop of water then has to run through a carbon filter. And that's what's cleaning. It's actually the microbes that are cleaning it. But that's what's making the water table clean, is having all those living roots and all that sequestered carbon in the soil.
Yeah. And you can see where the area is the worst is where we have commercial agriculture.
Right.
They're not cover cropping.
Yeah.
And to provide habitat, prey, nectar, and pollen for beneficial insects. And I was listening to a show the other day where they said for every one bad insect, there are 17,000 other insects. So don't spray for insects. Just have a healthy plant. And I mean, I get aphids on mine. I spray them off, or I leave them because they pull in the beneficials. So, I mean, I used to work at a nursery, and people would come in and want to kill something, and they wouldn't know what it was, but they knew it was a bug in their backyard. And it was like, well, you know, is it doing any damage? Why do you want to kill it? So I got actually in trouble for that. And it'll break up the subsoil, the clay layers and plow soils, which is when farmers they till at the same depth forever. And so they get like concrete, like 8 inches down or whatever. But the roots of cover crops will break through that and allow water to penetrate and air as well.
You should mention the diversity, Kathleen, or maybe you mention it later also, but oh, okay, never mind.
Did you notice the diversity of plants? I have it there in parentheses.
Right. I was just going to bring that to everybody's attention. So you don't want to do the monocropping, because then you're feeding the same microbes.
That's coming up.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. And to break a disease cycle. And this I thought was really interesting, that the USDA has given money to UC Santa Cruz, because right now they tarp the strawberry fields and they pump them full of fungicides to kill any fungus in that soil, and then they plant the strawberries. So this researcher has been given quite a sizable sum to look at crops that might kill those pathogens naturally. So it also stops erosion. And Lisa said in the old days, they left farms fallow to let them rest. Well, they're still doing it. And this was a rain event. And you can see down at the bottom of the slide, all of this farmer's topsoil is being washed away. And we're in fact losing more topsoil now per year than they did during the Dust Bowl. So this is a huge issue. And we just watched a movie, Common Ground, where they talked about this, and it's unbelievable. Yeah. It's really one of our greatest resources, and we're just washing it into the ocean.
Yeah, and it's like the top 1 inch of soil is keeping us alive. You know, like the top, our topsoil is why we have life on Earth.
Yeah, and this is a study that was done in 1991, And since farmers started using commercial fertilizers, the nutrient density of our vegetables has declined by astounding amounts because they don't have a healthy soil food web. They don't have what is supposed to be happening in the soil, and they're actually killing their soil. And by doing that, our food is not very nutrient. And there's a lot of people think that the obesity crisis is due in part to this. So this is one of my favorite slides. 95% of life on land is in the soil.
Wow.
I know. Isn't that astounding?
Yeah.
So we need to treat it better. It's like it way outnumbers us. If it wanted to revolt, we're dead. Okay, root exudates. It's the carbon that the plant pumps into the soil to feed everybody who lives in the soil, the soil biota. And it's at least 30% and up to 60%. And that is if it is not fertilized. And that's a key ingredient to this, that if you fertilize your plant, why would it waste all of that energy feeding the soil? It won't. It won't make exudates, and your soil will die. So you don't want to fertilize your soil. And I just watched a show on Nova. Nova did a great series on the earth. And one of them was plants. This was like 3 weeks ago. And there was plants in the water, living in the water, because it was, nutrient rich and it was delicious. And the only reason plants moved out of the water is they developed a relationship with fungi. And that allowed them to get enough nutrients to go onto land and get bigger. So you don't want to kill your soil with fertilizer because it will. So root exudates are the most energy rich of carbon sources, which is another reason why it's going to solve climate change. It is so much carbon that can be pumped into our soil if we treat it well and we keep plants growing. So this is the microbial activity. It also makes your soil aggregations, enhancing the soil structure, stability, aeration, infiltration, water holding capacity. And there's like nothing bad about cover cropping. And,
well, I'll just say the only thing, and I don't know if you get into this, Kathleen, but so I do work with these amazing gardeners in the small farm, and it's a larger scale than a backyard. But when you're intercropping your edible crop with your cover cropping, it does take some time to chop and drop them. I would say that the only thing that is hard about cover cropping is if you're interplanting with edible crops.
Yeah, but then you have to carefully choose your intercrop your cover crop.
Yeah,
so this is from Gabe Brown, who is one of my heroes. Healthy soil, the promise of our future. And there are 4 principles. He actually has 5 principles, but one of them is not realistic for this area. The 5th one is animals. So I left that out. But minimize soil disturbance, meaning no-till or digging. Energize with diversity, which means as many different plants as possible. Keep the soil covered at all times, and maximize living roots. Those are Gabe Brown's principles. So this I came across in my research, and I found it very interesting because so many people think during the drought, which we will have again, that it's better to not cover crop than to cover crop because it's going to use up all the water. Well, they did research and it in fact doesn't use up all the water because of the exudates. It is more efficient use of water and it doesn't take from, it's like plants are, we used to think of plants as they're in competition with each other, but they're not. They're friends. They help each other out. So if you have a cover crop and another plant needs water, they're going to give it some water.
Well, and the other thing with that is it increases your water holding capacity. So
Yeah.
if you have a whole bunch of living roots in your soil, they hold that water where it is instead of it running through.
Yeah.
So people have a misconception that if you have more and more plants, you have to water more and more. That's actually not true. With cover cropping, you can reduce your water by about 50% because you have living roots in your soil and they're increasing your holding water capacity.
And it also keeps the temperature cooler.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so how to cover crop? Diversity is not indispensable. Every plant has its own unique blends of sugars, enzymes. I'm not going to read all of this, but every root exudate varies all the time, depending on the plant's immediate requirements. So the greater the diversity of the plant, the greater the diversity of the microbes, and the more robust the soil's ecosystem. So
Yeah.
more is better.
Yeah. And I know Kathleen will get into this. Yeah. Get into the different types of cover crop, but you can buy seed mixes that have, instead of going and buying a whole bunch of individual packages, you can buy a seed mix that has 20 different things in it. So you have 7 different families. And so you can, it's easy to diversify.
Yeah. So when can you cover crop? Always. Always have roots in the ground. I went out Monday when it was raining and I cover cropped. So fall planting of a cover crop, you can start August to October or now when the rains are coming, because then you don't need to water them. The best choices are winter rye, crimson clover, oats or radishes. Spring planted cover crop, you're going to do cool season annuals or winter annuals. Summer cover crop, you're going to do warm season annuals like buckwheats and millets. And I always add natives to my mix, regardless of the season and regardless of the mix. So I just love this slide.
Oh, that
I
is
love
cool.
roots. It's just so cool that I threw it in there just so you could all appreciate the beauty of roots and how far down they go. And then this one as well. I mean, look at the roots. They're like, they're even further probably than the picture goes, but they're certainly as deep as the plant is tall. And in many, many cases, they're deeper than the plant is tall.
Yeah. And hopefully from that slide, you can get a sense of your living soil is the soil where all the roots are, where the rhizosphere is. That's your soil that's living.
Yeah. And I was trying to see, these could be little nitrogen nodules.
Oh, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Just aggregates. Okay.
Yeah.
So how to cover crop? A cover crop mixture or cocktail should have at least 8 different plant families with 60% flowers or broadleaf, 40% grasses, and 1 legume at the most. That you can play around with. Some legumes are different than others. I wouldn't blanket statement that anymore, but that was from Christine Jones, who we went and heard speak. It was fascinating, but more variety is definitely better. So think of your cover crop mix the same way you think of your own diet. The more variety, the better. How to cover crop broadcast, which is exactly what I did Monday. I just
Mm.
I had a mix of California natives, and I just threw them out in my vegetable bed that didn't have much growing in it at the time, and that's it. Or intercropping, which is, you can see this is probably cauliflower, kale, broccoli maybe, and this is just Renee seeds mix, and I put it in there, and it was a lot of cosmos and sweet alyssum and lobelia. I don't remember everything that was in it, but so the guys in the middle that I don't want to get too big and take over, you just chop and drop them, which what that means is you start at the top of the plant and you chop little pieces, and then you just leave those little pieces on the ground as a mulch. So this is my own backyard. This is my cover crop bed, which luckily my spouse doesn't go into the garden very often because she's much more neat and tidy. And first, pull out the irrigation lines. This is a lesson I learned the hard way. I've had to replace a few irrigation lines. And then I cut it down so it was mower height with my electric hedge trimmer, which is a great way to terminate your crops. And if they're broadleaf, I could have left it there and just, let it sit for a couple weeks, and I could have planted right into it. But instead, I mowed it down with my electric mower. And how to terminate your cover crop. There's several ways. I like chop and drop. And if it's a broadleaf crop, you can chop and drop at any point, because you're going to cut off the growing point of that plant and it will no longer grow. If it's a grass, you need to wait until it has set seeds and then chop and drop, and it won't grow back. If it's
That's if you don't want it to grow back.
Yes.
The more you chop that plant and let it grow back, the more carbon it's pumping into the ground. So I prefer to chop and drop all the time, because more and more carbon's being, we're trying to recarbonize the soil.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you could also throw more seeds in, especially if you're irrigating.
Yeah.
If you chop and drop and throw seeds down. And if it's an area where you're not planting anything else, like your orchard or under my roses, just let them go to seed. And I don't even, well, I guess I do chop them eventually when they become unsightly, but I let those seeds become my next year's cover crop in that area for free. Here's another way to terminate your crop. This is Gabe Brown's method. Is he has his animals go through and graze.
Which really is the best.
Huh?
I mean, that is the best way if it's available to you.
Yeah. So then I seeded and mulched this bed, put the irrigation lines back, and then I saw the birds eating all my seeds, so I put floating row cover over it, which I would not use today because it's a polymer. There are uses for floating row covers to protect a plant from an insect or something, but I use it very little now. Instead, I use burlap. And this is my Monday, what I did. And
I stopped using floating. We use floating row cover all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. And as long as you reuse it, I don't have a problem with that. But a lot of people use it once or twice, it gets a tear and they throw it out.
Yeah. I've been using it for same stuff for years.
Yeah. And so this was last season's cover crop. You can't see the broadleaf in there for the grasses, but they are. And then under my Meyer lemon, I threw some California native seeds. And I have a very shady area that I threw Larner seed, make some really nice mixes. And they have a shady mix. And then around my little citrus, I circled it so you could see it. I threw down some seeds. And my point of this is you can cover crop anywhere. I mean, I have creeping thyme growing between my pavers. And I mow that once or twice a year. That you can cover crop all over your yard. Any place you have bare soil, you can do cover crops if they're small. You know, the plants are small, they're never going to get that big. Like under my roses, I have false plumbago, and you know, it gets 4 inches tall and it's great. So just the more plants you can have pumping carbon into the ground, the better. Okay, so now we're going to be, we're on to plants. Lisa, do you have anything to do about how to cover crop?
No, I do the same thing you do, as I just broadcast. I will, the only thing I'll say when you went through your steps, like on Monday, I also cover cropped, and in the orchard, it was just broadcasting. But my edible crops, we had already put down mulch, some straw, and then we had covered it either with floating row cover or with cages. And most of those rows are broccoli. What I wish I would have done, so I'll make myself a note for next year, when we go ahead and plant the broccoli out at that time, go ahead and seed your cover crop, then put your mulch, then put your cover, because now it's taking me, you know, like 15 minutes or something per row to undo everything I've done, cover crop, you know, and then put everything back. So
Yeah.
It's just easier when you're planting out seedlings. I probably wouldn't do it if I was, if you're, let's say you're doing radish or lettuce or something that you're starting from seed, from direct sowing. Maybe I would wait and do the cover crop a couple weeks later after that seed has germinated. But if you're planting out seedlings, at the same time you're planting the seedlings is when I would plant the cover crops. The only other thing I'd say about that, because when Kathleen was saying the plants don't compete with each other, they help each other. That's true. And that's certainly true from ground level down. The more roots, the better. From ground level up, there is some competition for sunlight. The plants aren't competing with each other in the way that we think of competing, but they are trying to get sun so they can photosynthesize. So I would just do lower growing cover crops in, let's say broccoli, which gets about 2 feet tall or so. When I cover cropped on Monday, I like to do California natives because I'm very, very partial to natives. So I did tidy tips. I did 5-spot. I did, I think it's called Nemesia, but it looks like 5-spot, but it's blue. I think baby blue eyes. And those are all California natives, but some of them, they get between like 2 and 4 inches tall. So they're not gonna compete with sunlight with the broccoli. The broccoli is going to get plenty of sun because it's going to be so much taller than they are. So,
Yeah.
So I would just think about that, you know, maybe like a fava bean or something that might get 6 feet tall or 4 or 5 feet tall. That is going to shade out your crop. Pardon me?
Sunflowers.
Or sunflowers, which are beautiful and they're really an important plant.
Yeah.
But you have to be
put them
careful.
on the north end of your garden.
Exactly.
Yeah. The south.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. So what do different cover crops do? Soil erosion, cereal rye, annual ryegrass, soil compaction are deep-rooted taproots, annual ryegrass, oilseed radish, which is also daikon radish, and sunflowers, and nitrogen fixation, hairy vetch, which I would never plant hairy vetch. At least in where I live, it becomes it's everywhere. And it's taken me like 5 years to get rid of it. Crimson clover, Australian winter peas, sun hemp, cowpeas are all lovely legumes.
Yeah, I will say, Kathleen, because there's been like 3 slides with the daikon radish being pulled out, and you can see the daikon radish.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing photo remediation, which I don't think we're talking about today, you leave those roots in. You cut them at soil level,
Yeah.
or you chop and drop them, but you leave that radish in, and you leave all the roots in for cover crops. You never take the roots out. You always just cut them at soil level, or you chop and drop from the top down, because the microbes love living roots, but the second thing the microbes love is dead roots, and they'll consume those roots within a couple of weeks. So, you get worried that, oh, I can't grow another broccoli right next to my broccoli because the roots will get in the way and there won't be enough soil. And that's just not true. I mean, in no time at all, those microbes have broken that root system down that's what they're eating. They're eating the organic matter, and they're pooping out, nitrogen and
Daikon radish actually holds nitrogen in its little body, and as it decays, that nitrogen is released.
Yeah.
So it's not only stopping leaching, it's then feeding your plant.
yeah. So leave the roots. I mean,
Always leave the roots.
I feel like we've made that clear, but it's just that some of your slides keep showing the radish itself.
People keep pulling it out just for the photo of
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
in normal
it's
practice, without a camera around, you're going to leave that in the ground.
Yeah, leave the roots in the ground.
So nitrogen scavenging, radishes, cereal rye, and ryegrass, which is really important. That means you're not leaching nitrogen into our groundwater or, out into rivers. And like Florida's coast has huge bacterial blooms, and it's nitrogen caused. Disease nematode suppression, brassicas, great at it. Or just good rotation. Oh, good rotation practices also help with disease. Weed control, cereal rye, allelopathic and good at smothering weeds, and pollinator habitat and food source, buckwheat, clovers, diverse mixes. Grasses and brassicas are better than legumes at reducing nitrogen leaching. Cereal rye is very effective at reducing nitrogen leaching because it can hold so much nitrogen, as well as daikon radishes.
So when Kathleen's talking about nitrogen leaching, you've probably all read about like the huge algae blooms in the Gulf of Mexico. And what happens when farmers add synthetic nitrogen to their soil, it just moves right through their soil and into our waterways, and then into the Gulf of Mexico. And then all that nitrogen causes these huge algae blooms, which suffocate, it takes up all the oxygen and then suffocates the marine life in the soil. And that's another reason why you don't want to be using fertilizers. For me, organic or inorganic fertilizers, you just want it all done through this system that we're talking about, through the cover cropping system.
Yeah, because most of the nutrients your plant needs are water soluble, so they're going to move through your system. Not all of them, but some of them. Brassicas and mustard. I love daikon radishes. I don't have any more, but I had a front lawn for a while and it was compacted. You could just tell the soil was compacted. So I just got a big bag of daikon radish seeds and I threw them all over my front lawn, and my spouse didn't notice for a couple months. And then all of a sudden, when they were flowering, she was like, "What the heck is going on out front?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just getting rid of our compaction."
Honey.
But the mustards and the radishes are good at weed suppression, soil pest, getting rid of soil compaction and scavenge nutrients. Buckwheat, I just love buckwheat.
I love
Whenever
buckwheat.
wondering what you should throw out some buckwheat.
Yeah, that's a
'Cause-
pretty one. I mean, Kathleen has like a crimson buckwheat here, Kathleen,
yeah,
on the right. My buckwheat is the white one, but it has kind of a wimpy, you can see the root system. It's just kind of a little wimpy root system. But it's so pretty, and it's just like my buckwheat's blooming right now. It's just such a pretty little kind of welcoming flower.
yeah. And I mean, it grows fast.
Yeah.
The beneficials love it. It rejuvenates low fertility soil. I mean, it's just a great little plant.
Yeah.
Oats, cool season annual. You could throw oats down in this area anytime, but they are allelopathic, so they're a naturally occurring herbicide. So they're a good one to have. They also scavenge nutrients. Rye, same thing. Rye, this is actually amazing to me. Rye's fibrous root system can hold up to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre.
Wow.
Which is just ridiculous. Why anyone would fertilize. So this is a mixture from Nature Seeds. They just partnered up with Xerces Society. I'm not sure how to say it. It's XERCES. And they have come up with like 5 different California native mixes, depending on where you are. And this is the greater San Francisco Bay Area. I get the California coastal because I'm closer to the water, but it's just a really nice mix of flowers. It has some lupin, it has some flax. I mean, it's just, I would love to see this growing anywhere. And to this mixture, I would add some grasses. I would add some oats, winter rye, and barley.
Yeah. I'll just add to that slide, Kathleen. Also, when you cover crop, like all those things in there, yarrow, wallflower, clarkia, we used something called elegant clarkia this last year. It's so pretty, you know. I mean, I do it in my I actually cover crop everywhere in my home garden, but at the farm we cover crop, and it's just beautiful. I mean, you're just working in such a beautiful environment.
Yeah,
All these things.
For anyone over the hill, I would throw in some milkweed as well for the butterflies.
Yeah.
I'm too close to the coast. I'm too close to where the butterflies migrate, that we don't want them to spend the winter here. But I would throw some milkweed into this mix as well.
Yeah.
But
And
your beneficials from this mix is just going to be outrageous.
Crazy. Yeah. And when Kathleen says over the hill, she doesn't mean if you're old. She means if you're on the west side of the coastal range, on the east side of the coastal range, not on the west side. So you do the narrow leaf milkweed on the peninsula, like up and down, San Francisco to San Jose, whatever. But
if you're 10 miles from the ocean, plant milkweed.
If you're 10 miles from the ocean?
Yeah, that's what they say. You are.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So yeah, anyone on the other side of the Santa Cruz Mountains, grow some milkweed. So this is the USDA cover crop chart, which is it's 2018. So they've known about how important cover crops are. They just haven't done anything with it. But this is too many legumes for me. I would pick 1 or 2 of these. But your broadleaf here, I really like this chart because it gives you broadleaf, it gives you grasses, more broadleaf, and then more grasses. And it says what season you should be using what. Cool season is up to here, and then warm season is all this. So, but you know, where we are in California, I don't follow, especially with my cover crop, I don't follow the warm, cool season laws very closely.
Yeah.
And this is from SAR.org, and SAR is Sustainable Agricultural Research Education. And these slides are benefit to insects and bees. And it just kind of goes through every plant you can think of, you know, seeding depth, bee value, wild bee value, beneficial insect value, the pest that the crop might get, and then notes. And most of the pests the crop might get is actually going to bring in beneficial insects. It's kind of a trap crop, and I wouldn't worry about that. And there's lots of that. And then this is the Xera Society, and this is just so you always have something in bloom. Because, you know, insects, birds, they always need stuff in bloom. And this is just, you know, you have early, mid, late. So there's always something yummy for the critters to eat. And then this is what scares the bejesus out of me. There's a research company in San Diego called Salk that is trying to change plant roots structure. They're trying to put a carbon-rich polymer, which is naturally occurring in cork, cantaloupe rind, and avocado skins. They're trying to get roots to be covered with that, and then they're trying to get the roots longer. And they're doing this for cash crops. They're doing this for like wheat, corn, soybeans. They're doing it for 5 cash crops. And the reason they're doing it is so that farmers can continue to till, but this part of the root will stay in the ground. And they think that this is gonna cure climate change, which just, to me, is just insane. Just cover crop is all these farmers need to do, instead of make this like Frankenstein plant. It's just crazy. And they've gotten tons of money. They've gotten like $50 million from Bezos.
Oh, geez.
I know.
Yeah.
It's really scary.
Yeah.
So have fun, throw out some seeds, and make your yard beautiful. That's it. Organizations, there's some really good resources out there. And like SAR Western, they have a Western area. So, and Davis, UC Davis, of course. Although I didn't include a lot of UC Davis stuff because their termination method is herbicides.
Yeah.
And I think you're doing more damage than good.
That's true of UC Santa Cruz also.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the sites I used. And thank you, Linkso.
Okay.
And the newest Master Gardener end of the day slide.
Oh, okay. And then can probably, if there's any questions.
I'm sure there aren't.
There are a few.
It's also
Okay,
cool.
so let's go back and let's see here.
So
You know, to address those who are asking, will the video be available? It'll be on Linkso's community resources page. So it'll be up tomorrow. So you can watch this back if you missed something. All right, so first question. What is double digging?
oh, you want to talk about it, Lisa?
Yeah, it's just there's a guy named John Jeavons who Kathleen, I can't remember the name of his book.
Remember either.
He's kind of a famous gardener, and he actually started the UC Santa Cruz. One
Yeah.
of his proteges started the garden at Santa Cruz, and then that became the farm at Santa Cruz. But his method, and this is a long time ago now, he even has converted to no double digging, but a long time ago he used to want you to dig down and take that first dirt that you dig and put it at the beginning of your row and then dig again. So you're digging, let's say 8 inches and another 8 inches, and you're taking the soil from one end and putting it to the other, and you just keep digging. And what, so that's one method, but really it's been decades since they've known that doing that destroys soil structure. And so
I wish his followers knew that though, because most of his followers still double dig.
yeah, but I think it's a smaller and smaller group. I think most people are more into
So
like the Elaine Ingham, you know, more the let's keep our soil, you know, how do we keep our soil alive? And oh, you took out the Kiss the Ground, Kathleen, slide that you had.
I did.
Yeah. You know, Kathleen mentioned we went and saw Common Ground, which is a movie put out by the same people who put out Kiss the Ground. I'd say Kiss the Ground is a way more inspirational movie, and I liked it better. But it really, you look up stuff that the US government has been doing, and they've been recommending this forever of don't disturb your soil. It's just all the regenerative stuff that Gabe Brown is saying, you know, don't disturb your soil, keep your soil covered, keep living roots in at all times. If you can, add animals and animal manure. So it's not necessarily new research. It's just became very effective post World War II for large scale farms to, you know, add synthetic nitrogen. But
Yeah.
now it's just causing all sorts of problems, and those did take 50 years, some of those problems, to show up, and then they're like, no, we need to go back to the way of doing it pre-World War II.
Yeah, before we had bombs, and they took the material to make a bomb and instead started putting it on our crops. I don't know if anyone remembers Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma bombing, but his van was full of fertilizer that he detonated. So
Yeah.
that's, if you're using synthetic fertilizer, that's what you're using.
Okay. we got off on a tangent there. But anyway, any digging is not good. What I am doing a little bit now when I chop and drop my cover crop is just maybe the first inch of soil, maybe put a tiny bit of soil on top of the chop and drop. And that just helps the microbes break it down a little bit faster. You don't really even need to do that. You could if you wanted to, but the main thing is don't disturb your soil and don't step on your soil. We don't talk about that because it's really a cover crop cast, but the worst thing you can do to your soil is compact it. So step on a path, you know, make yourself a little path that you can step on, but don't step on soil.
Or don't step on soil very often.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, sometimes you have to, but try not to.
When I'm mowing my old cover crop to put a new one in, I'm stepping on my soil, but you know, I do that once a year.
Yeah. Some people put boards across, like if they have if you have a raised bed, you're really not stepping on your soil. But if you're in the ground, make your rows narrow enough that you don't have to step on it, that you can just work it from the sides. And then I put wood chips in all my paths, but I'm going to switch over and use clover. I'm going to try to just cover crop in my paths, like with micro white clover, which then you're stepping on. It's like a lawn then. I mean, you're stepping on the white clover, but you're stepping on those plants. But at least then I've got living roots in my paths. Okay.
Alrighty, thank you for that. Next question is, while sowing cover crop seeds, do we need an inoculant?
No,
Okay.
We could explain that a little bit more. Everything that things will come into the soil naturally. You don't need to add anything. And when you're adding an inoculant, you don't even really know what, is that from the East Coast? Is it from another country? You really want things that have co-evolved in the area where you're gardening. So you don't want to be adding some foreign stuff from like some place that isn't native to your soil. And also, I think it's been proven, I can't remember, Kathleen, but any inoculant is dead by the time you put it on you're just wasting money.
yeah, and you don't need it.
You don't need it.
Alrighty, thank you. So I'm going to combine two different questions because they both relate to water. Can you talk about water needs for cover crops now that we don't typically have overhead sprinklers, instead having drip systems? How do the cover crops get watered? Is it all from rain only? And what about areas that never get summer water?
There's a part of my backyard where I cover cropped a couple years ago, and I mean, it was the drought. So what I did is I just got a little hose end timer, which, they're like, I don't know, $30, and a hose and those little square sprinklers that just cover a little area. And I set the timer to go off for 2 minutes every 6 hours. And I did that for about 10 days, and then it was fine.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people do cover crop. You'll hear people saying, oh, you can only cover crop in fall because they are just planning on the rains to germinate those seeds and then to water that crop. And it is really nice to throw cover crop seeds out either in the rain or right before the rain. But I find they come up just fine, even in rows that have drip irrigation. Also, because the drip irrigation is just a little slit or it's an inline emitter, but right underneath it's all that soil is evenly moist. So if there's no rain in the forecast, you're throwing your cover crop seeds out in the middle of summer, you are going to have to keep them moist and wet to germinate. Another reason why I like to cover crop with California native is they have co-evolved to go through a dry summer. So where I'm sitting right now, you can't see, but off to my right is I have some manzanita and some things in there, and I've just thrown out cover crop seeds. And then every year I don't do anything. They just go to seed and then they come up the next year, and it's really, really pretty. I mean, in springtime, it's just beautiful. It's just like a field of wildflowers, and then they die back because it's California, and then they come back in winter and bloom in spring, and it's just really, really pretty. So when I think of cover cropping, I am thinking of a vegetable cropping system, but I've covered cropped my whole yard, and it's just super, super pretty.
Yeah, and like the other day, I cover cropped at one of my clients, her fruit trees, and she has irrigation there. So I changed the timer to go for a couple minutes, a couple times a day, and I'm going to go back in a week, and it should be fine.
Yeah, everything should be germinated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty, thank you. So the next question is about natives. And is there a source for how to cover crop an empty bed in the summer without irrigating, and when to plant and what plants can be used? Native plants best, perhaps?
I would definitely do natives, and you're probably going to need to irrigate to get them to germinate if you're doing it in the summer. But once they're germinated, they should be fine.
Yeah, or you could throw out native seeds now, and then hopefully we'll be getting rains. And then my yarrow, yeah, a lot of things, perennials will come up just, you just broadcast the seed, it comes up, and then it's a perennial, then that yarrow's there.
You can never get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do natives broadcasting in the summer. Because for sure you are going to have to water them. And I think I'd probably do natives in the fall or now,
Or
like-
spring.
yeah, or spring, especially if we're still having water, if we still are having rain. But if you have irrigation, you could do it any time of year.
Alrighty. So this person likes to plant tomatoes every year, and they're wondering what would be the best combo of cover crops to use for that.
With their tomatoes.
Yeah,
Um,
for tomatoes.
I would do some low growing natives.
I did grasses. I love grasses. They're my favorite cover crop because their root structure is so amazing. Tomatoes get super tall. Tomatoes can get whatever 6, 7, 8 feet tall. So you could do low growing because that would be pretty. But you could also do something that gets a little bit taller.
Yeah.
So I like grasses, but
Well, and it should be some broadleaf and grasses. That's the ideal cover crop mix.
yeah,
And there's some grasses that are shorter than others.
yeah.
It wouldn't be such a pain in the neck.
And if you wanted to do natives, you could do some bunch grasses. Larner's seed, which Kathleen mentioned, they have a mix of California grasses, and they have something called their beginner's mix of California grasses. I think that'd be nice. But like Kathleen said, the more diversity, the better. So if you can do a broadleaf, if you can do a grass, if you could do one legume, or a couple legumes, but a mix of things would be your best bet. You mentioned nature's seed, Kathleen. I don't know if you mentioned it.
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay. So I get my cover crop seeds from 2 sources, from Larner's and from Nature's Seed. And Nature's Seed makes a California wildflower mix. And personally, that's what I would probably, because it has like 20 different things in it. I think I would just get Nature's Seed California wildflower mix. And you showed what was in that anyway, Kathleen, because now that they're working with the Xerces.
And that was the California, San Francisco Bay Area mix.
Okay, I would get that. I would get the San Francisco. If you live, I don't know where the person lives, but if they live on the peninsula, I would get the San Francisco Bay Area California wildflower mix, and that's what I would cover crop with.
And if they live on the coast, get the California coastal mix.
Oh, good.
From Nature's Seed. They have a bunch now.
Yeah, Nature's Seed is in Utah, but I think they're really good about getting really specific for areas of what is best to grow in your area.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the most resilient cover crop if you're using it on a path that is in a high traffic area? There will be garbage cans dragged on the path once per week.
White clover.
Yeah, I think micro white clover, so it doesn't get tall.
Yeah,
And you got that from Nature's Seed also, Kathleen?
I did.
Yeah. And is it up, and how does it look?
It looks great.
Okay. And is that at one of your clients' house?
No, it's actually in part of my backyard.
Okay. I haven't broadcast it yet, but that's what I'm going to use is micro white clover. And it's supposed to stand up to people walking on it, it's pretty tough. I think it's a tough little plant, and it's a legume, so you're getting some nitrogen fixing. I don't understand the mechanism, and I'm going to have somebody explain it to me. But if you do too many legumes in your cover crop, or if you only do legumes in your cover crop, your soil turns into cement. Your soil gets really hard. And I don't understand the mechanism around that. It's been explained to me, but I still don't understand it. So that's why we say limit the number of legumes you have in your cover crop mix.
Yeah, but that was also that where we heard that, where the soil got hard,
Mhm.
it's monocropped with the same legume over and over and over.
Yeah.
And that destroyed the soil structure.
Yeah, and probably any monocrop of anything is gonna destroy your soil structure, so that you get back to the diversity, grow a lot of different things.
Exactly.
So maybe that's what it was. I don't know. I'd have to do more research, but this year I'll be using micro white clover.
Yeah. And as long as you're not using it over and over and over in your entire yard, I think you're
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, well, that's all the questions. We got to them.
Woo-hoo!
Any closing remarks, reminders, advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, but thank you guys for coming. We're clearly passionate about this. And what else, Kathleen? Anything else?
Just that photosynthesis is the miracle of life.
Yeah.
And the more plants we can put out there photosynthesizing, the better off our planet will be.
I'm going to leave with one last thing also, is the reason why I'm very partial to natives is we're having a huge decline in insects, which is causing a huge decline in birds. And we kind of went through the different trophic levels. But if you want a good book, Doug Tallamy, Nature's Best Hope, and he just did a book, The Nature of Oaks, and how oaks are a keystone species for us. So another reason to cover crop with California natives is you'll increase your native insects, which will increase your native birds, which will increase everything else. So it's a nice way to take care of not only the microbes in your soil, but other animals on planet Earth.
Yeah. And don't freak out if you have insects.
Yeah, insects are good.
Like, take a deep breath and wait a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And it'll probably all be okay.
And I really try not to kill insects, even if they're in my house. I try not to kill them because there's such a shortage of them in the world right now that we really need to do our best to protect the insects.
I kill mosquitoes.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
Well, thank you so very much, Kathleen and Lisa. This is a fantastic talk, and it'll be up on our website live tomorrow. So check it out if you missed something. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.